This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
This week, we yet again discuss that thorny issue of multiple pensions.
I think the government wants to take the lead on this. That's why they came up with a proposal. Although the president has been exploiting these loopholes.
And flamingo numbers on the island are declining dramatically.
We've seen that if we compare the January of 2010 with this year's January, we had just 20% of the population that we had in 2010.
If you were with me last September on the programme, I was talking to two of our MPs about the problem of multiple pensions here in Cyprus. It's very much on the front page again this week, with various committees in our parliament discussing the issue. The government, it seems, has come up with a proposal. Well, it seems perhaps they didn't like the proposal that the two MPs I spoke to last year put forward. I'm in a bit of a muddle. So I have asked the Professor of Finance at the University of Cyprus, who is also a member of the Cyprus Academy, to join me and try and clarify what's going on. He is Stavros Xenios. Stavros, thank you very much indeed. We've had this business of multiple pensions discussed actually for many years, and nothing seems to change. First of all, can you explain the issue for people who missed my last discussion? Because I think there are a lot of government employees who get a pension when they retire, but then if they're employed in another position, they also get another pension when they retire from that position, apart from the fact that I think they also get their pensions much earlier than you and I do.
Yes. I mean, the issue for people in public positions is that we should give them a generous remuneration. So to attract people to serve in public positions, even if they are not independently wealthy. The last thing you want is to have people who say, don't care about money, I'm going to serve my country. We want people from all walks of life to be able to serve their country, recognizing that serving your country for a while, it may be a sacrifice professionally. So it's good to reward these people generously. Now, the issue is if someone works for the government for a few years, like a minister or member of the parliament, then they discontinue their professional career, and what happens with their pension? And most of us have to work throughout our life for like 30 or 40 years to earn a pension, and our politicians earn a pension after they serve 2 or 3 or 4 years, a very small period of time. We could argue that that's okay. You work a little bit for the government, you earn a pension. What became a really big problem, and even the first promise we may question, you work for 3 years for government, then go back to the private sector. But I'm willing to accept, let's give them some pension for this. The problem is when they go to multiple positions, central bank governor, member of the parliament, minister, from every position they accumulate a pension. And this is absolutely irrational. And it's typical in Cyprus because either we don't understand the fundamental principle, we just give them one pension, even if a little bit generous, we end up discussing it forever.
Well, I did suggest at my last discussion on this that the sensible thing to me, I'm not a financial person, I know very little about finance and money, but it does seem logical to me to say if you have 4 or 5 jobs over your career in the government, and let's face it, an awful lot of MPs then become mayors, for example, at the end of your working life, you should be allowed to take the most expensive pension that you've earned and nothing else. And I was told very clearly by the MPs I spoke to that that is not applicable in Cyprus because it went to the Supreme Court and pensions are deemed to be personal property and you can't take them away. A Supreme Court ruling.
Well, I mean, these are always excuses. I mean, the Supreme Court is there to interpret the law. So if the law is interpreted in a certain way, which is irrational, it doesn't mean the Supreme Court is irrational. It means the law is irrational. Change the law. So I understand you may not be able to stop right now people who already served and they're collecting multiple pensions. But if the law is written in the way you are suggesting, which I think is absolutely rational. I mean, that was my thinking too, is you work in your life, you're entitled a little bit pension here, a little bit pension there, and then we get the maximum. So it seems to me that if they want to find a solution, it's a question of framing the law in such a way that the Supreme Court will not interpret it the way you said. Now, what is done is done. In the past, you cannot change it. If the law was written a certain way, and some people have accumulated multiple pensions, you may not be able to change it. But in the future, the pension is the pension you accumulate along multiple jobs throughout your career.
Now, what I understand, and again, I may have misinterpreted, that the government is currently proposing is that instead of more than one pension, at the end of your term of a second, third, or fourth job, you will get a lump sum payoff.
Well, the way I understood the proposal is instead of a pension, you get a lump sum. This is okay, but the problem again is you get a lump sum for every position you serve. Now, if this lump sum is proportionate to the 2 or 3 years you served, like for every 4 years you serve, you get, I don't know, half a year extra salary to help you find a new job, I would say that's okay. But if the lump sum is a huge amount of money to help you build your pension, then again it's not reasonable to accumulate multiple lump sums. You go from an MP, as you said, you go from an MP, you become a mayor. After a mayor, you become, I don't know, something else. You cannot accumulate multiple lump sums. So either review the lump sum as a small amount to tie you in until your next job. If you are not re-elected as a member of the parliament, you have to start professional career again. This may take several months. If that's what we are talking about, a few months of salary, that's okay. Multiple, every time you finish a job, you get this small amount of money. If they want to have a pension-like fund, like a big amount of money, then again, it cannot be for multiple positions.
Well, and it's also being paid for by you and me, the taxpayer. I mean, it's plundering the public purse, basically.
Well, that's where I was at the beginning, because I don't want to fall on the other trap of, we the taxpayer, and it's a waste of our money. I want my politicians to be remunerated generously, to attract good professionals. I don't want people to say, no, I have a job, I have a good career, I'm not going to go into parliament or to become a minister. But having said this, then it has to be reasonable. So multiple pensions is totally unreasonable. That's why I insist, either a small amount of money, I'm willing to pay as a taxpayer a small amount of money for the ex-minister for a few months to find a new job. I'm also willing to contribute to his pension or her pension, but assuming one pension throughout their life. The way I understood it first is they get a few more pensionable years. You work for 3 years for the government. This counts for 6 years of pensionable service. But then this became multiple. It's coming from multiple sources. So it should be the basic principle is what you said at the beginning. Throughout your life, you accumulate pension, a few pensionable years in this position, a few pensionable years in another position. We accumulate them, we get the best one, and that's all you get. Which means across time, like you and me, when I served 30 years at the university, I get a pension, which is quite generous for having served 30 years. I don't get a generous pension for having served 3 years in this university, and then I go to another university, I get another 30 years of pension.
So what's to be done? It sounds like we need to change the constitution, actually, so that this law isn't part of the constitution.
No, it's the way it's framed. I mean, your pension is yours, and if the law says that when you serve as a minister, you get a pension, and then when you serve as an MP, you get a pension, and when you serve as a mayor, you get a pension, and then the Constitution says these three pensions are yours. That's not how the law should be framed. The law should be framed that if you serve as an MP for 3 years, you get, let's say, six pensionable years of pension. You accumulated 6 years. And then if you serve as mayor another 3, you get another 6. We're generous. And as a minister, you serve for 2, you get another 4. And when you add them up, you get the maximum of 30 years.
Do you have any hope that this will ever come about? Because the other thing is, as I always say when I'm talking about things like this, turkeys don't vote for Christmas. They're all sitting very happily on their pensions, aren't they? And although it's clear that the current framework is to not affect the people who already have their jobs, it certainly is planned for people who come into those jobs in the future.
I think the government wants to take the lead on this. That's why they came up with a proposal. Although the president has been exploiting these loopholes, from what I understand.
Well, he got his pension when he left the foreign ministry, didn't he, many years ago? He's also getting paid as the president. So he's one of the prime people who is benefiting from this.
Yes, okay. But at the same time, having benefited from this and nothing much can be done, and being the president, he has the challenge to show that in the future, these practices will stop. So the pressure from the public is there. I do believe the president can take the lead, and also the parliament. No, I also see like some of the objections from the members of the parliament was that this lump sum will accumulate. So you don't solve the problem. You create a problem of getting multiple lump sums. So I think we should keep up the pressure that this is unreasonable, that the taxpayers cannot stand it. And it's always in politics, you find a group of politicians who want to differentiate themselves from the other colleagues. And there is a public, as they say, the pulse of the public. And you try to take the pulse of the public. And the pulse of the public is, let's have a reasonable pension scheme. Multiple pensions, multiple lump sums for the rest of your life. This is not a reasonable remuneration. You know?
Well, what's more is that it is, I'm presuming you're the financial expert, just fiscally and financially unsustainable, surely.
Well, unsustainability always comes out from some other things you could do. So unsustainability, we faced it in 2013 when our economy crashed. So we could be spending our money on something else. We could be spending our money on public schools, on healthcare, right? So yes, it is a strain on public finance, and that's why we're discussing it. There are solutions, Rose. It's not. I mean, many countries have this issue and they solve it. So let's stop pretending this is not solvable. Let's agree on this principle, which I think you and I seem to agree, and put the pressure on the politicians to come up with a specific law amendment.
Indeed. We live in hope, as they say, Stavros. That is Stavros Zenios, who is Professor of Finance at the University of Cyprus and a member of the National Academy of Cyprus. Many thanks.
Thank you, Rosie.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
We're going to talk once again about birds in Cyprus. There's more bad news, it seems. So I've asked Melpo Apostolidou, who is the director of BirdLife Cyprus, to join me to talk about flamingos. But before we get there, Melpo, I also want to talk about vultures, which is what we usually talk about, because I gather that you've had another death. Can we deal with that first, please? What happened?
Well, we got a notification from a GPS tag that there's a dead vulture, but I can't say much more on the cause of death because we have to wait for the necropsy and the toxicological analysis, as we don't really have any much suspicion from the field at the moment.
Okay, so it wasn't electricity lines?
No, I don't think it was, but okay, we cannot exclude anything at the moment because there might be fractures on the bird that we haven't seen. So we need to wait for X-rays and necropsies and analysis. So I'm afraid I don't have much information to share at the moment.
Okay, but it's sad news anyway, because you've just received more birds, I think, from Spain. And what are the current numbers of vultures in Cyprus?
We have 36 at the moment and 15 more in the acclimatization aviary. Every time we have a griffon vulture loss, every loss is significant with such small population, and it's very important to see the cause of death so we can work to alleviate the threat.
I know you're fighting tooth and nail to make sure they don't disappear entirely from Cyprus. Can I just ask you if you know anything about vultures in Africa? I'm sure I read something in the last day or two about problems there as well with poisoning.
I think there was a recent poisoning incident in Africa and all around the world. Vultures face more or less the same problems, mostly poisoning and also electrocution and collision with the power grid. In Africa, they usually poison them because vultures are sentinel species. So whenever there's a poaching of, large animals like elephants, large animals, because vultures, they gather around the carcass. This makes it easy for the game wardens to see. So they spot the poaching. Therefore, the poachers, they put often poison bait to kill vultures. Mostly, this is the reason in Africa.
It seems to me, I can, I suppose, understand that people who are making a fortune out of killing big game species might want to do that. But I think in places like Cyprus, where poisoning tends to be to try and keep down protected foxes or stray dogs or whatever, or rodents, do the people here not understand the significance of vultures and their contribution to our biodiversity? Because they're apex, top of the list, aren't they?
Yeah, you're right. In Cyprus, vultures are not targeted when culprits placed poison bait. They indeed target other scavengers like foxes or dogs. Or often it's to resolve conflict between hunters to claim hunting areas. We've been doing a lot of communication work, awareness raising, very targeted in hunting groups, in farmers, in local communities, in areas where vultures are present mostly, so within their core ranges. And it's both a matter of educating people on the importance of vultures, the impact of use of poison, but also, Rosie, it's very important that investigation procedures are enhanced and there's a enhanced enforcement of the quite good law in order, to have some examples, and people in the countryside need to know that it's a crime and it's penalized.
Well, it certainly has been penalised, finally, hasn't it? I think last year. So hopefully the message is getting across. But I really called you today to talk about flamingos. Now, anybody who's visited our salt lakes and wetlands in Cyprus at the right time of year, which is around about now, will have been amazed at the flocks of flamingos. They look amazing, they are amazing, but I gather that the numbers are dropping dramatically. Can you tell us why?
Well, there are quite a few reasons behind this decline, but what's quite worrying is especially at Akrotiri Salt Lake, where we're used to see, we know that whenever there's water in the salt lake, there are also flamingos, and this does not seem to be the case in the last few years, maybe in the last 15 years, where there is a steady decline of, on average, 10% per year. Just to give you an indication, because we're doing midwinter counts every January since 1992, we've seen that if we compare the January of 2010 with this year's January, we had just 20% of the population that we had in 2010. And overall, it seems that while the flamingo numbers are decreasing across Cyprus, it seems that in Akrotiri Salt Lake especially, they are decreasing even more, and they prefer other sites, and they avoid Akrotiri Salt Lake. And Akrotiri is actually probably the most important wetland in Cyprus, the whole Akrotiri Peninsula wetland complex. And this is quite worrying because this means that something in the water quality is changing. So while overall there is a population decline on a European level as well, which is also seen in Cyprus, especially for Akrotiri, there's a steep decline. While we see that other sites like Oroklini has a steady population, but at Limni Lake the numbers are increasing. Larnaca also has shows a decrease, but not so much. Especially Akrotiri, Salt Lake, the population there, the numbers there are worryingly decreasing. And we know that there are some developments, construction developments, north of the Salt Lake and very close to adjacent to the wetland within the catchment area, like the casino. So when the casino was approved, there was a condition that south of the casino, a buffer zone would exist, would remain, as a protection between the casino development and the wetland of the Salt Lake. And now we see that buffer zone is being built as we speak, and there was another condition that the road that would serve the additional development would go through the Environment Department. At the moment, this road is being built and probably without a permit. And all these developments, they increase the flow in the Salt Lake because it causes sealing of the ground, obviously, due to all this cement being placed on site. And there's also the issue of pumping the water. So to build all these developments, obviously you need to pump out the water because they're building in the wetland. Where is that water going? And has it been approved? Has it gone through the environmental permit? So we're doing, and when I say we, I mean as a state, as a country, we're doing everything we can to destroy the most important wetland in Cyprus.
And it is the most important because it's Ramsar Convention protected, is it not?
Of course, it's a Ramsar Convention site. It's also protected under the Birds Directive and the Habitat Directive, the equivalent of the sovereign base area laws. And we have sent letters to the department. We are part of the committee who looks at these studies, and we send letters and have done press releases about this. And we are in communication with the relevant stakeholders. But it seems that the road is going ahead, these developments are going ahead, and there seems to be, an indifference in how we're dealing with these issues.
An indifference, or literally people, sorry, I can say this, probably you won't, not doing their job. The Environment Department is tasked with making sure that environmental impact studies are carried out before any developments take place. And I remember talking to your predecessor, Martin Hellicar, bless him, 2 or 3 years ago about what you thought was going to happen if this went ahead, and here we are, it's happened. We're getting fewer flamingos, the wetland is being destroyed, it seems, and still the building goes on.
It's really very frustrating to see this happening. We aim to send letters about it, and it's important to say that there is an infringement case already against the Republic of Cyprus on how the Natura 2000 sites are protected on the ground.
And that's what, at the European Court? Who is looking at that? And if they come back and slap our wrists, which is what they usually do, I suppose it means we'll pay a fine. The taxpayer will pay so that the developers can go on developing?
Yeah, exactly.
It's terribly depressing. Before you go, let's try and end on a lighter note, if we may, Melbourne. Can you explain to us a little bit about where the flamingos come from? They overwinter here, I think, and you did say that numbers in the east of the island were going up. Does that mean that some of the birds that would have come previously to Akrotiri have said that water's disgusting now, we'll go somewhere else, and they're still coming to Cyprus? Or is there a possibility that they'll go elsewhere completely?
No, there seems to be an overall decline in Cyprus. Larnaca Salt Lake also shows a decline. Paralimni shows an increase, which is not too far from Larnaca. But this means that there are probably better conditions, and to put it more simply, better food or more food. So the water quality affects the food chain for the flamingo and the shrimp that live in the salt lake.
So basically, if the food is disappearing, obviously they're not going to go there because the restaurant's close to closing, as it were. What about the problem with lead pellets? I know that has been a problem in the past, and you've worked very hard to try and stop any hunting with lead around all these lakes. Is it working?
Indeed, that's still an issue, and under a LIFE project, which is an island-wide project with many of the country authorities also involved, including BirdLife Cyprus. So we have done some analysis, and we are proposing some measures in Larnaca Salt Lake, mainly in order to remove some remains, let's say, of lead pellets. Paralimni Lake is a bit more complicated because the shooting range still operates very close to the lake, while it needs to be relocated, and there seems to be a huge delay in this.
Okay, I did say let's end on a lighter note, but the other thing I want to ask you, because it's so depressing, is whether or not there is anything you can do about the situation in Akrotiri. It's very difficult to put things back the way they were, isn't it? Is it a lost cause?
No, of course it's not a lost cause. And I know that the sovereign base areas are looking into the issue because this falls under their responsibility. And we are pushing for restoration and closer monitoring, coordination among stakeholders to share data and see what's going on there. And to answer your previous questions as well, of course you have climate change that also affects the population of flamingo, but on a local level there are things that we can do and restore any impact.
And are we doing them? I mean, we can't hang around discussing this. We need to do it now, don't we?
Well, yes, we do. And, well, I would go a step back and say that some of the developments obviously should not have gotten the green light. But since they have, it's very important that the authorities that put terms and conditions when they give the permit, they need to follow up with those terms. And we do hope that the infringement cases by the EU, will push for some action, and we are pushing as well through media work, through coordination with the competent authorities as well, and we are sharing the data and what we're seeing with the population of flamingos in order to warn the authorities on the situation.
Well, let's hope that this time, for possibly the first time, they actually take some notice. Melpo, always a pleasure talking to you. Fingers crossed that we won't lose our flamingos. So many people come here around the wintertime to take photographs and to just enjoy an amazing sight. I'm surprised that the tourism ministry isn't thinking what would happen if they disappear completely, because we sell them as a sort of tourist product to some people, don't we? And if they disappear, well, I suppose not too many people who would come here for the flamingos will also come to see the concrete blocks that are going up in their vicinity. Many thanks for your time, Melpo. Best of luck with the work you're doing.
Thank you, Rosie, and hopefully next time we will have some good, better news to share.
Oh, let's hope so. Melpo Apostolidou from BirdLife Cyprus. She's their new director, and we wish her and the team the very best of luck. Thanks for joining me, Melpo.
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you very much.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.